DOGMAN claimed our treehouse. Dear Scary Stories NYC. When I was a kid, we had to deal with a pretty scary dogman taking over our treehouse in the back. The situation was eventually resolved, and I think your viewers might find the story interesting. This was way back in the early 1970s in the Midwest. My dad had left our family a couple of years earlier, and we didn't know where he was. My older brother Dennis was in Vietnam. I was 13, and my little brother Jack was 11 and a half. We lived with our mom in an old house in the country that had been left to her by a relative on her mother's side. Well, it's off the beaten track, but it's paid for, is how she used to describe it to relatives in long-distance phone calls. We were in fact at the end of a very long beaten track that we beat down ourselves each day, walking out to the main highway about 20 minutes away from our front door. To get on the bus to our school, we needed to walk along a highway with cars whizzing by so fast that it felt like you were caught in a hurricane. We often brought a shopping list from Mom with us to school. Then afterward, we'd have to run to the convenience store near the gas station by school, grab Mom's items, pay for them, then race to make our bus home in time. If we missed that bus, it was another 1 hour wait, plus a scolding from Mom when we got home. That's why sometimes we'd go back through the woods behind our house and sit up in our treehouse for a while before going inside to inevitably be punished. So what does any of this have to do with the dogman, you might be asking? Well, technically nothing, but that was our life at the time when our Aunt Sharon invited us to spend a month and a half with her in New York City. No matter what your opinion of that place in modern day, it was very exciting to us as kids. Completely different from living a 20-minute walk from the highway and the woods, to be certain. Both Jack and I moved to the city when we got old enough, although not New York. I do think it was that vacation with Aunt Sharon that influenced our desire to escape the woods, though. And of course, another large influence was the fact that cities tend to lack the presence of the dogman. When we returned home from that vacation, Jack and I couldn't wait to climb back up into that treehouse. As soon as our mother decided we had done our share in terms of unpacking from the car, we were allowed to go have a brief unwinding time in the treehouse before bedtime. We ran to the tree, but before we could climb up the ladder, our presence was met with a very nasty sounding growl from up over our heads. Looking up, I was surprised to see big monster fangs being put on display, specifically to frighten me. It worked very well, too, as I stepped back from the ladder, pushing Jack behind me as well. He could tell how surprised and scared I was, so he started crying. That made the dog growl louder, so he whispered to my brother to shut up. The whispering agitated the dog even further, and I pushed my brother back toward the house. The dog was standing up on its hind legs, with its front paws leaning on a wooden little fence. I thought it was an ordinary, if large and vicious dog, but I was not yet thinking dogman. Yes, it was standing up, but it was leaning on the little fence or whatever you want to call it there, and any dog can do that. I had not seen it walk or anything of that nature yet. We ran home and told our mother about the big dog, and she just sort of shrugged her shoulders. Well, I guess you can't play in the treehouse tonight, she told us, and we loudly protested. She said it was almost time for bed anyway, so we'd figure it out the next day. Maybe the dog would go away in the morning, she suggested. Well, it didn't go away in the morning. It didn't go away the next morning either. Nervous about annoying her and getting yelled at, we cautiously approached our mom and told her that the dog was still in the treehouse. Well, she did get angry at us, but she also told us to take her back there so she could see this puppy dog for herself. She asked us why we would be scared of a dog anyway. The first sight she had of him up in the tree, his eyes were opened up wide in curiosity. I don't think he'd ever seen our mom before, by the looks of it. She made a comment about what a cute puppy face he had. I guess you could say that from a great distance. Once again, she asked us what in the world could get us so upset about this pretty little puppy. When we reached the proximity of the tree, though, she had her answer explained to her by the dogman. This time, when the dog saw us coming toward him, he didn't stay up there and growl. This time, he made an acrobatic leap over to the top of the ladder and began dropping himself down to ground level at a faster pace than even I had ever been able to do it. This creature looked so much larger as it came down into your eye level than he seemed when you were just looking up at the top part of him, peering down at you from the treehouse itself. It's like he started coming down, and then just continued and continued and continued, like this unendingly long beast who looked more like a human being than any canine had a business looking. In one graceful move, the beast turned on one dog foot and began accelerating quickly in our direction. Even now when he was down on ground level, I still had to look up to see his massive long jaws, each holding teeth that should have had to have been registered as lethal weapons with the authorities. He was drooling already as he eyed us, and I had a growing suspicion that he wasn't only interested in keeping us out of the treehouse, he also looked to be interested in satisfying his hunger and pursuing his carnivore diet. I pulled my slack-jawed, disbelieving mother back until she realized this was really happening and started running toward the house under her own power. Jack threw his uneaten sandwich of avocado salami and American cheese on white bread with mayo onto the ground in front of the dogman, who stopped to gobble down that nasty snack. This gave us all the time we needed to get back into the house. Once we were safe, Jack and I went around locking doors and windows in case the beast tried to get in and at us, although it never ended up doing anything like that to us, thankfully. Our mother sat there stunned, repeating over and over that the dog walked upright like a man. We made dinner for ourselves that night, as Mom sat in her chair in front of the TV set that she had forgotten to turn on. I guess she had a lot to think through in her head on that night. Jack and I just stopped using the treehouse and stopped going too far back behind the house at all anymore. No more walks in the forest or anything like that. And Mom didn't even have to tell us this. It was just understood. That turf had been taken over by something bigger than us, who was willing to defend his turf against invasion. We were obviously not equipped to invade enemy territories, and so we just shrank the space that we lived in to avoid conflict. At night, Jack insisted that he heard the dogman outside our window, trying to see in past our curtain. I spent my own money on earplugs that I saw advertised in one of my mom's magazines. I slept with those in my ears at night, blocking out all outside noise. If the dogman was there, I didn't even want to know about it. That's how scared I was of that beast man. But it wasn't a topic of conversation in our home. We were kind of ashamed that this was happening to us, for some reason we didn't really want to even think about. I guess we felt guilty, as though this were our own fault in some way. I don't understand that part of it when I look back, but maybe it was shame that we had accepted second place in our lives to some animal. We were no longer top of the food chain even on our own property. We lived under the cold rule of a beast. Our opinion mattered less than that of a dog. Maybe that was the source of our shame, I don't know. Without our father there, we felt incapable of fighting back against this bullying. There didn't seem to be anyone who would be on our side if we were to ask for some aid or assistance. We did have a neighbor that was sort of near, but he was always trying to get it on with our mom, so we found him creepy. We were just two kids and one woman, so we felt vulnerable. That all changed when my brother Dennis came back from Vietnam. I won't say that he came back undamaged, but he appeared on the surface to be healthier than ever. It felt like the clouds had parted and the sun returned when Dennis came home, and almost right away, he asked us about the treehouse. That was when the mood turned quiet again, as none of the three of us really wanted to talk about such a sad thing on such a happy occasion. When Dennis finally dragged the entire story out of us, he then threw his boots back on and marched out to the treehouse to see for himself. The rest of us went out to the back porch and watched him walking over to that treehouse. When he got there, we could see him, but he was too far away to really make out anything he was saying. It was like watching a silent movie as he first saw the Dogman up in our treehouse. Just like that time when we had let our mom out there, the Dogman leaped onto the ladder and quickly lowered himself to the ground. Then he began a bipedal run directly at my brother Dennis, and we all flinched and held our breath. Dennis didn't turn and run like we did, though. When that Dogman ran up to him, Dennis held his ground. When he got close enough, Dennis cold-cocked that beast man right at the end of his dog's snout, and you should have heard him yowl. We heard it echo through the woods all around us. We watched as, in pantomime, our war veteran brother lectured that Dogman, bopping it on the end of the nose any time it tried to talk back to him. The Dogman stood a good foot taller than Dennis, but he didn't hold that advantage for long. Dennis bopped him and bopped him until the Dogman sat down, in the way a dog will do it. The creature was being given my brother's own personal brand of obedience classes. Each day, Dennis worked with the Dogman. In fact, the beast became his new obsession. I forget how long it was, but eventually he was forcing us to join in on the training. He said he wanted the beast to respond to any of us as though we were him, so we needed to know what to do and what not to do in various situations. If we didn't do what Dennis told us with absolute confidence in ourselves, the beast might read that as submissive behavior, and he might challenge our rule of this turf again. Dennis had all these theories, and I don't know where he picked them up, but they seemed to be valid. Even Mom took the education Dennis was sharing with us seriously, and a lot of fear left our lives during that period. Dennis would work the dog out every day. He'd be made to chase sticks, to retrieve balls and frisbees, and to sniff out something with a given scent hidden by Dennis somewhere out in the woods. The more abilities and talents we learned that the dog had, the more frightened and intimidated I became by him personally. He could sniff me out wherever I was, which meant there was no place I could hide from him. He was like a superhero if he wanted to be, but he could just as easily decide to be a super villain. He could turn our lives into a horror show anytime he was in the mood to do something bad. I knew this Dogman hadn't actually turned over a new leaf, since Dennis assured us that he hadn't. In fact, Dennis insisted that the Dogman was wild, that he was feral, and that he would never be anything but wild and feral, no matter what any of us said or did. The key to keeping him docile was taking the dominant role in every situation. Dogs only care about status, so we had to treat him like he was lower status than we were. Otherwise, we were going to find ourselves in a very bad situation. Under the new Dennis regime, Jack and I had control of the treehouse returned to us. At least once we cleaned out all the dog poo that someone had left up in there. The Dogman, who my brother named Pole after Pol Pot, would now wait downstairs if we were using the treehouse. If he wanted to come up, he would whine and tap on the ladder to ask our permission. If we did let him come up, he knew that he had to behave and not kill any squirrels or birds in there. He could get very rambunctious. One of the things that Dennis had instilled into the Dogman was that it was very disrespectful to humans to stand on your hind legs if we're around. A dog is to sit on the ground or stand on all fours. A dog must never challenge a man or a woman. A dog is not to even challenge children like me and Jack. Dennis told us that the Dogman understood the concepts and was mostly okay with obeying, but that it was going to be up to us to enforce this law. If we saw him stand on his hind legs, we were to tell him to sit or lie down. We needed to constantly reinforce his place. Otherwise, he would go back to acting like he was the alpha, and that we were all either of lower status, or else just prey with no status at all. We never had friends over during that period because it seemed too dangerous. I mean, we're talking about 6 months, 7 months here. In the winter, we mostly let him sleep up in the treehouse, as we hardly ever used it in cold weather. And then, Dennis came to take the dogman away the following spring. People ask whether we were sad to see that dogman go, but I know my mother wasn't. She was so happy after Dennis drove away with the beast that she popped open a bottle of wine that she'd been saving, and then fell asleep in her chair, blasting old Mario Lanza records. While Jack and I weren't that excited, we were certainly not sorry that the creature was leaving. Even during the period when the dogman was obeying the commands that Dennis had taught us, I never felt like he was very committed to the entire thing. I felt like he was humoring Dennis by being nice to me and Jack, but that at any second he might snap, and the two of us would become an afternoon snack for the dogman. So when Dennis came to take the creature off somewhere, I had no objection, and neither did Jack. I guess that I now wish we had some photos or that we had taken some home movie footage of the beast or something. But we didn't think of it as event television back then. It's like we once had to have men come take raccoons out of our attic, and we didn't film that either. These were annoyances of living in the country, and we didn't think we'd still be telling these stories 50 or more years later. Also, we never foresaw a time when people would be demanding proof of any of this. I guess I didn't think, oh, this is a legendary dogman. I just thought, glad that thing is going away before it bit someone. I had never gotten comfortable with the dogman. So I don't know where Dennis brought the dogman, and I'm unclear what happened to Dennis either. I know my mother told me and Jack that Dennis lost his life in a mountaineering accident, but Dennis was not a mountaineer. She wouldn't discuss it further, and she professed no knowledge of where Dennis brought that dogman. Maybe he brought him to the mountains. To me, those sound like fake stories. What mountain range was he climbing exactly? What state or country did he lose his life in? Exactly when did Dennis take up mountain climbing? Do we at least have an approximate date of when this is supposed to have happened? His passing is wrapped in a mystery as deep as the dogman himself. So, I apologize that I didn't really miss the dogman, because he wasn't nice when I first met him, and I never got over being scared of him. But I will admit that I don't see him as evil. Maybe if Dennis had been with us when we first met him, maybe he might have always been kind to us, you know? And maybe then I might never have even realized how frightening he was when he got angry. Maybe he would have become a part of our family right from the get-go. It's really amazing how each of our choices really shape how the rest of our lives play out. Not that Dennis had a choice about being overseas, obviously. But if Jack and I had known more about dogs or animals in general, we might have been able to handle things without our mom having become endangered. But we were pretty young, and I can't go back in time to fix things anyway. I'm not sure if there's anything that I personally could have done back then to make things better. The time that Dogman claimed our treehouse.
Rochelle P. sent us a super thanks. These days, thanks are more stable than banks. Please join us in thanking Rochelle P. for sending us her kind super thanks and making this episode possible. You too can send us a super thanks by using the thanks button under any of our videos on YouTube. And if you'd like to find out more, then here's our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button. Or
join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.